An excellent episode of television stays with us long after it ends. I mean, people are still talking about The Wire and The Sopranos all these years later. We're still rewatching Martin and Living Single, laughing at all the jokes. So what makes these shows so memorable? Well, it starts on the page with a great script. My name is Rae Benjamin and I'm a TV writer. I'm also the founder of In the Cut, a company that provides education and resources for aspiring writers of color. On the In the Cut podcast, I'm going to dissect some of the best episodes of TV with other professional writers. Season 1 features guests who've worked on iconic shows like Insecure, Blackish, The Witcher, and many more. We're going to do a deep dive to really understand the structure of what makes these episodes great. So, whether you're a writer yourself or just a pop culture fan, this is a place to understand the craft of television storytelling. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Breaking Bad.
We in the cut.
If you haven't watched Breaking Bad yet, you're probably living under a rock. Or maybe some glass. Little meth humor there for you. After receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis, mild-mannered chemistry teacher Walter White decides to cook up some drugs so that his family can have money when he's gone. He links up with his former student Jesse Pinkman to learn about the meth game. In the pilot, they arrange a drug deal, but the whole thing goes sideways. By the end, Walt's in his tighty-whities with a few dead bodies on hand and a trash bag full of cash. It's clear he's not the man you thought he was. He's ready to flip the script and do whatever it takes to make sure his family's set when he's gone. And here to help me break down Breaking Bad is the illustrious Troy Dangerfield. Troy is an excellent writer and director based in LA. He's most recently staffed on The Witcher on Netflix, which is where I met Troy. He also got to write on the Tomb Raider show on Netflix. But other than that, he's an anime nerd. He's a ranked chess champion.
I am.
And he's a basketball enthusiast. He is a Warriors fan. We forgive him for that. This is usually a Lakers only house, but we allowed him to come on this show.
What can I say? I love winners,
Oh, wow. I'm gonna go there. Well, thank you so much, Troy, for being on this show.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to get into it.
I'm excited too that you picked Breaking Bad. This is also my GOAT show of all time. I think it's plenty of people's favorite show. And so Breaking Bad, it premiered over, I think, 15 years ago at this point, but it's still so relevant. You still see people on the internet making memes of Breaking Bad, making references. Why do you think this show still resonates with people after all this time?
I think it's just a great question. I think that it's still such a gripping show, and it's just such brilliant character work. We have, when you talk about television, I think it really is about watching change, whether it's a thing, a person, whatever, but it is change. And I think Breaking Bad is the ultimate change, because when we meet the main character, he's so different from the beginning to the end. And we really get to see the idiosyncrasies of the change. And the stakes are high. It's something that anybody can connect with, and we all can get into the perspective of Walter White in a way that's really exciting. And so I think that when you create great characters, they never go away. I mean, after all these years, people still love Tony Soprano and all the things that he's all the crazy things that he did in that show, but he's still such a beloved character because he was such a specific and strong character. And if you can create great characters, those shows are always going to last the test of time. Yeah,
I think Breaking Bad really was a groundbreaker in terms of, you talk about creating change. I think before that era of Breaking Bad, Mad Men, The Sopranos, you really didn't have characters changing on television. It was sort of just a static setup every time, whether we're talking about our traditional sitcoms or, they're just the same characters getting into hijinks every week. Or even in dramas, it was really more procedural things that were dramas on television, whether it's like ER, you know, all those police dramas from the 70s or whatever. But I feel like Breaking Bad and that sort of golden era of television, as people refer to it now, really put forth the idea that we can have characters change, and it gave more of a cinematic quality to TV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also the audience has changed, right? I think like when you think about our parents' generation or different, like you watch TV to kind of be comforted. And it's just like some characters, like you watch Cheers, those characters are never going to change. Like, but you're going to go in there and there's going to be hijinks and you're going to love watching them do exactly what they always do. And again, that still happens today when you think about The Office, and it's more a comedy thing, but The Office, you have a lot of characters that don't really change, but we still get to see what the hijinks are. And there's something really comforting. It's like a warm blanket. But I think for us, the golden age of television happened because I think we wanted to be surprised. There were so many turns. There were so many different ways of looking at different situations. And now it was like really connecting to these characters and seeing how they're changing, and it surprises audiences. And I think that it could be, you know, a little bit of our ADD or ADHD of like immediate gratification and needing things to change quickly, but it is something that really works in television if you have high stakes to really be able to turn, and it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think Breaking Bad specifically is so good because the writing is just so brilliant. There's not a moment wasted in the pilot, which we'll get into, but just the show as a whole. Like, I think it's very hard to end a show. The show ended well in a very satisfactory way. And I feel like it's just rare that you watch a show where every episode feels purposeful. There's not really any filler episodes. There's not any sort of meandering, like they're not doing anything. Every episode pushes the plot forward, pushes the character forward.
Absolutely. And
you're just like nonstop ride from the very first moment of the teaser to the series finale.
Absolutely. And what's funny, what's really, really interesting is when you rewatch the pilot, like I watched it again just for this, and what's really exciting is that when you watch the pilot, knowing how it ends, it almost feels like he knows exactly where he's going. And it's so funny because like sometimes there are shows where that's not possible for you to always know. And Vince may have known like exactly, he may not have, but he did such a good job that I believe that he always knew exactly where this character is going to end and what that would be and who he would become. And when he gets there, it's so satisfying because for us, it's like no time wasted, but it's like based off of where Walter White starts, there's only one place that he actually could end. And we get there. And it's really, really gratifying.
Yes. Brilliant show. So let's get into it. We start with the teaser, which in my opinion is like most iconic teaser of all time. You see it actually copycatted a lot on other shows. Like once I rewatched it and then preparing for this podcast and watching other shows, I'm like, oh, this is like the Breaking Bad pilot. This is like
absolutely.
So I feel like the Breaking Bad pilot, we start sort of in the middle of things.
Yes.
You know, iconic, the pants flying up in the air, falling down. We see Walter White. He's, you know, in his tidy whities with the gas mask. You don't know what's going on. He's recording this sort of video in case the police find it. You know, he's not admitting to anything, but he's saying like, he's writing a note to his wife, like explaining himself. We hear sirens. We see that like, oh man, he might kill him. So like, this is the type of character that rather than go to jail, he would rather just end it all. But you know, it's not even the police. It's just like a fire truck goes by. So why do you think this sort of technique of pushing forward in the teaser out of context, why does that work so well?
Well, here's what's interesting. The technique isn't unique. There are so many TV shows that just drop you in and you have to figure it out. what I think makes Vince so smart is the high stakes nature and the ridiculousness of the situation. It's like the fact that it's like he's driving, he's had the gas mask, he's doing the thing back and forth. We look behind and we see the beakers, we see whatever. We also see 2 dead bodies.
Yeah.
Like the stakes are very high and he's going through it and he's driving. And then we see that there's another body that's unconscious, that's blood's coming down. And we're just trying to catch up to what's happening. And then he hops out and you can see him, this person, in crisis. He's in crisis. And of course we can see all the things and we can put pieces together a little bit of understanding something bad happened, but we don't know why. And then he gives us all the information we need. My name is Walter White. This is a message for my family. This is not an admission of guilt as the police finds it. My wife, I love you. Son, you're the man of the house now. And it's like, we understand a person at the end of their rope. We've all been in moments where it's like, maybe we haven't killed people or bodies everywhere, but we've had moments where you just feel like, I think this is it. This is like the worst day that I've ever had. And putting a character in that place where they're in it and then not telling us who they are, what's happening around them, and making us like go back 3 weeks to figure out how we got here is I defy you to watch the teaser and then turn the TV off. There's too many things that are happening that are so interesting, that make you so curious, that you want to understand. And I love writing because I do think that there is a part of the brain that is always putting together puzzles. That's why one of my personal pet peeves when writing is like, sometimes, or when I'm reading someone else's script, sometimes they're telling me things that I want to discover. Like I want my brain to be able to catch up. And Vince gave us nothing except the things that we needed to go on the journey. But he wanted us to be a little confused, and letting us be in that place only makes us want more. And I think that is something for me. And I tell writers, is like, that is the goal. You want to have a relationship with your audience and try to keep them a half step back, not too far back where they don't know what's going on, but not too far ahead where they get bored. And it's a really difficult thing to do.
It is. And I think why that teaser is also effective is just the contrast between Walter sort of doing this crime, but we see that this looks like a nerd.
Yes,
like,
yes,
like you
yes,
see
he's
this
out of
like
place.
middle-aged man, like he just looks like a dork, and you're like, how did this dork get in this situation? So it really doesn't match up with
make sense.
Your expectations of what a criminal would look like. So you're really intrigued to just want to keep watching and wonder, how did this guy, this nerdy looking guy in tidy whities, how did he end up in this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really wild to see how it develops in that way, you know? But once the teaser's done, I'm locked in. I want to know where we're going. I want to know what the next thing is, and I'm on the journey. And that is the purpose of a teaser. Any teaser should grip you that much and make it impossible to change the channel.
Yeah, I think Breaking Bad does that perfectly. I think the reason why this pilot is also so iconic is because the structure is just chef's kiss,
it's beautifully
perfect,
done.
like to the page, to the act structure.
Yeah.
And I know it's sort of trendy right now, I think, to throw away structure. Technically, you know, you don't really need act breaks if you're on a cable show or a streamer, because act breaks are where commercials would be. But I do think that having act breaks gives you a sense of pacing and make sure that you're hitting certain plot points to keep your audiences engaged.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Breaking Bad, it's good because of that structure.
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
just because you don't have commercials, me personally, I still write to an act structure, even if there are no acts. I still think in terms of that, because I think a lot of times we're in a space now where you see shows and you watch the whole episode and you're sort of like, I don't know what the point of that was, what happened, why, and it's because they're not writing to structure.
Absolutely. And I love structure, and I think that's really something that's really important to me, but you do need rising and falling action. If you don't have that, again, you're not helping your audience go where you want them to go. They're just kind of in a kind of blasé place as the story is unfolding versus taking them to a place and then bringing them back down and then taking them to another place. It should be like a heartbeat. And I think like it's really, really cool when you're able to do that well. Everything just falls into place. Like when it's really funny, sometimes you don't even know the structure that like sometimes if you don't plot out what your structure is, if you know what you want the story to be, the midpoint still happens at the right time. And the thing is, things kind of just fall into place. And it's like really beautiful because it's almost cosmic that this is the way that stories should be told.
Yeah, so Breaking Bad follows a traditional drama structure with a teaser and 4 acts. So we start with Act 1 after the teaser, after that crazy teaser. We get really a sense of Walt's status quo, who he is in his daily life. So
Yeah.
how would you describe Act 1 Walt?
So Act 1 Walt is struggling. It's struggling. When we come to the house, he's like in his bed and we can clearly see that he hasn't slept. And then he gets up and he's on the Stairmaster and Vince does this beautiful thing where he just shows us a placard on the side and that he has won a Nobel Prize in chemistry. And this is a dude and he's on the dorkiest Stairmaster step thing. And it's terrible. But what I love about the first act and meeting Walt, and this is a thing that I think a lot of writers struggle with, you have to make your characters suffer. Suffer to the 10th degree. This needs to be the worst day of their lives, or the worst sequence, even if it's 2 days, because I do think the first act is over 3 days, I think. But everything sucks. It's bad. So we can start. It's his 50th birthday, and he can't even have bacon. He starts with his wife having 50, and it's this veggie bacon that he does. He's like, can't have that one thing that I want. Goes to school, and then there we have like one of his students and he's talking about chemistry and he's really passionate about what he's talking about, and there's some student jackass flirting with this person who's not listening to him, and then he interrupts the entire class to do this thing and Walt lets it go, but you can just see that it grates on him that he is not respected. Then he goes to work and he's a cashier, and we get to see that his boss is like, no, you got to go out and wash the cars. And he's like, we talked about this. I can't do this anymore. And then we go out and he's washing cars. It's the most degrading thing. And then he ends up having to wash the car of the same student. Like just that. How much that would suck to be in a place where you're with someone who doesn't respect you, and now you are on all fours washing the inside of their tires. It is the most beautiful way of showing how much this person like needs to change, how much his life currently sucks. He goes from there, he comes home and it's a 50th birthday party for him that his brother-in-law completely takes over and makes it all about his DEA bust. And as he's toasting him, he literally takes the drink out of his hand and drinks his beer. And it's just like all of the ways that we can watch this man be emasculated, be disrespected. Then he goes home that night and gets the most lackluster hand job ever done on television history. So she's literally shopping for something as she's like casually whatever, and she's just like, this is for you, and it's like the worst. He's having the worst day. Then we go to the next day. He's back at work. He's still washing cars. We don't need to see that they pushed him out there again, and now he passes out. And now he passes out, he goes to the hospital, and they tell him he has cancer. Again, the worst day of this dude's life. He finds out he has cancer. He doesn't even tell his family. He comes home, and his wife tells him, hey, did you spend $13.50 on the MasterCard? $13.50. And he's like, oh yeah. She's like, that's not the card we use.
His
Suffering.
wife's so annoying.
Suffering. So we can talk about Skylar and how people feel about Skylar. I defend Skylar in different parts of the thing. It's like, she gotta go. She got a hard, it was a hard time. She did not, she struggled. But suffering, like he can't go to Staples and buy something for $15 without being rammed up. And then she's also trying to find a way to pay, I don't know if it's the mortgage or whatever thing, because she's getting late fees. And so we're constantly seeing that money is an issue. Also at breakfast that morning, we see like her son's like, hey, there's no hot water again. You guys need to get a new hot water heater. And he's taking it all in. And we, as an audience, are starting to feel for him. We're starting to feel how much it sucks to be Walter White. Mm-hmm. And so after the cancer, we find the cancer. For me, that's the end of Act 1 when he decides to ask his brother-in-law if he could go on a ride along to see a drug bust. Yeah. And so like that is the Act 1, and it is all character and it's all Walt's life sucks.
Yeah, I feel like it really touches on the themes of the show, which I would argue is like impotence.
Yes.
And being someone who is overlooked, not taking advantage of their power and becoming someone powerful.
Absolutely.
Because it was never about the money. Like Walt tells himself it was about the money, but there's multiple times throughout the show where he had enough money. He could have stopped, but he kept going because it was not about the money. It was about respect and power.
Absolutely.
And this was a man who's brilliant, as you said, like this is a Nobel-worthy scientist being a high school teacher. And then we later learn, I think in the next episode, that like he was part of this team that, you know,
they're all billionaires
they're
somewhere.
all rich, and then he's just like some high school teacher. So it's just a man who feels like cheated by life.
Yeah.
And so the whole pilot is crafted to show this sort of defeated, powerless man reclaim his power, essentially.
Absolutely. And what I love about Vince is he does this beautiful thing in the scene where he's in chemistry class, he's teaching the class. You see him light up about talking about chemistry, but Vince does something that's very meta. He has him say, "What is chemistry?" And people say, and it is, you're right. It is chemical change. It's about change. And he literally says, when you have an atom or matter and you apply the right amount of pressure, things change. That is life. Life is up, down, and change and transformation. And he is about to go through the greatest transformation. And the pressure that is going to be applied is going to happen in this episode. And as the show progresses, the more pressure that he is put under, the more he changes. And who he becomes is not the greatest guy, but it is closer to who he wants to be.
Yes. I think everything you said is true, brilliant, and it's just like the foreshadowing is so subtle. That's why this pilot is so great, is every scene feels purposeful. Even throwaway moments like when they're at the birthday party and they're watching the DEA drug bust on the news. It seems like that's just a throwaway moment, like, oh yeah, that's what's happening. Walt's like, oh really?
Yeah.
We seized however much money. It just seems like a random thing, but that's what he recalls back to then decide, oh, I'm gonna sell meth.
yeah, absolutely. And again, it's also one of those things like we want to believe, like we can't believe that this straight-laced person would just decide to start selling meth or cooking meth. That's not something that we can buy. But if you put enough pressure in all of these situations where we can see he struggled, we can see what he wants, we can see how disrespected he is. Well, yeah, if anybody's pushed to the brink, they would do anything. And it now, when he decides to start cooking meth, no one in the audience is surprised.
No.
Nobody in the eyes of the characters around him are a little surprised. And we'll talk about Jesse in a second, but like that is definitely like the transfer, you know?
Yeah, so true to structure, we end Act 1 with the inciting incident, getting diagnosed with cancer. And that leads us to Act 2, where really the character sets their goal and commits. So in Act 2, we have him, like you said, asked to go on the drug bus. He's trying to scope it out, and he sees, Pinkman, his former student, as part of this drug bust. So can you pretty much describe how does that inciting incident really change Walt from this downtrodden person we see in Act 1 to Act 2? How is he starting to make his journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I think the reason or how his change is kind of like personified comes later when he's talking to Jesse, and Jesse's like, "Hey man, why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? Like I know you." And I think that's also something that Vince did that was so brilliant, to create a character that is distant enough from Walt, but is also intimately connected with him, because he's like, "You flunked me." Like, you know what I mean? They have this relationship. And so Jesse really asks him, why are you doing this? And he has a line that feels like a throwaway. And he's like, "For the first time, my eyes are opened." And like, that can be interpreted in so many different ways. But to me, there is freedom in knowing that there is an end. Mm-hmm. And I think that all of us experience that. If we knew that that we only had 1 year to live, we're not doing the same thing. If we knew that we had a year to do X, Y, and Z, or accomplish whatever, everything changes, everything moves different. And I think for me, his freedom, his understanding that I don't need to follow the rules because that hasn't gotten me anywhere. And why die this person with no respect and unliked and whatever? Like, there's no profit in that. So why not? And Jesse doesn't get it, but over time, I think they both start to understand that, like, this is who Walt wants to be. He wants to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He wants to be that important, that respected. And even though later in the show, later in the pilot, even though he doesn't really get it, when the drug dealers come, they're like, "You're an artist." Like, they're an artist. He's like, I'm just a chemist. But like, you can see a little bit, he still likes it. He still gets validated because there is a respect there. They try to kill him, which is difficult, but the respect is really important for him. And so like, him knowing that this is where he's moving, and like, I'm going to start doing meth, I think him knowing that he's going to die really pushes him forward into a path that he otherwise wouldn't have taken.
Yeah, I think that for writers, we're always told, choice reveals character.
Yeah.
And the choices Walt makes in Act 2 really reveal him, because, some people, they just get diagnosed with cancer and, they're like, maybe I'll take a green juice.
Yeah, exactly.
Sell some meth.
Yeah,
so I feel like you said, it sort of brings out these sort of base desires in Walt that were always there and hidden. And I don't really argue that he changes so much. It's more just he becomes who he really wanted to be.
Absolutely.
And the person he was meant to be. It's not really a change. It's more just a reveal of his true nature. So I think that's really great.
Absolutely. And when he goes, there's a scene where he goes back to the school and he's getting all of the equipment to cook. Yes. He's like a schoolboy. He's actually really excited. He's like, "Look at this Bunsen burner." Like, he's really excited about it. And Jesse obviously doesn't give a shit. But like, it's just so cool to see that, like, him being able to do chemistry at a high level is the thing that also is cool. He is such a nerd about what he loves, and him being able to profit from it is really validating. You know?
Like, chemistry is sort of his superpower. He got pushed out of his company, so I guess the next best thing for chemists is drugs.
There's not a whole lot of jobs out there,
chemistry. But so Act 2, he really sets the goal and commits that, I'm going to be this drug dealer.
Right.
And then sort of Act 3 is more about the obstacles that are in his way, and sort of we're also seeing the changes that he's making after he's committed to this. Act 3, we get a hint of the person Walt will become.
Yes.
And raise the stakes. So there's sort of no turning back in Act 3. We get to a point where he takes out all his savings to buy the van, RV to cook the drugs in. So there's really no turning back. He has no money. He cashed out all his savings. He's really committing to the bit, the drug dealing bit.
Absolutely.
But how is Walt? We see some hints that he's going to become this crazy person when the scene where they're shopping for clothes with his son and the bullies come. Can you describe that scene?
I love that scene, because his son's looking for new pants, and like, of course, I think I know I experienced that thing of shopping with my mom. I think I was much younger than him, but like his son, but like shopping with my mom and looking for the thing. And then there's these kids from the high school that's making fun of him. And not only are they making fun of him because he's shopping with his mom, they're making fun of his disability, which is something that like any parent, you can see it immediately in Walt, that he gets upset. And all in Act 1, we can see twinges of him getting upset, but he never acts on it. He never acts on it. But now because he's on this new path, he has to do something. And what's funny is that not only does he decide to do something, he has a strategy of how he's going to do it. And so he turns around and walks out the back door. And so for Skylar, that is the most Walt thing ever. There's confrontation and he's going to go as far away from it as possible. And now she, as a pregnant woman, is going to be like, well, I'm going to take care of him. Don't listen to these guys. And so she goes to confront them and he comes around the building. And so behind, and he kicks the back of this kid's knee and then steps on it. And so then gets in the place and then is like almost ready for this rumble. He's ready to fight. He's like, hit me, take your best shot, big guy. And like Skylar is like, so surprised and probably a little turned on. She's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Because she's never seen this side of him. But it also comes out so quickly, so naturally, and he's good at it. He's good at being intimidating, which is something that's not surprising. And even his son is like, wow, Dad, like, all right, you know what I mean? And I think those are the little steps along the way where he's getting the positive feedback that this is the version that he wants to be might actually be better for everybody, you know?
Yeah, I think, again, just how every scene is just brilliant foreshadowing. So when he does take charge and do this later in the pilot where we see him do more violent acts, it doesn't seem to come out of nowhere. Every scene sort of escalates and builds in a causal relationship, so it feels earned. A lot of times when I'm reading scripts that don't quite work, it's because the scenes don't feel earned. It seems like you've established this character one way and then they randomly do act a crazy something. Act. Yeah, and it's just for your purposes of telling the story rather than a natural sort of action the character would take. Because we see Walt take incremental steps. Everything he does, you don't feel like, oh, that would not happen. You feel like, yeah, I could see
that now. I can see that now, you know? And again, he's constantly being putting pressure on himself, like, and the world is. And so in that moment, he knows, like, I'm going to defend my son. And even us, for a second, when he leaves, we're nervous. We're like, damn, Walt, we thought this might be the time. And then he comes out and he drops the hammer, and it's great. It's really gratifying because we have watched as an audience, have seen him eat shit for the entire episode. And now he's not doing that anymore. And we're rooting for him because we want him not to be the bumbling dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, you know, that act also gets into the dynamic of Jesse and Walt more. And the Breaking Bad is low-key, like, really funny.
It is. It has a lot of comedy in it.
Yes, it's so funny. I think that people, because it's a drama, forget how funny it is. Yeah. But I personally think the best dramas need some comedy. The best comedies need a hint of drama. That's how you make a well-rounded show.
Absolutely.
And so talk about the dynamic between Jesse and Walt and how they're just sort of opposite characters really add to the story.
Well, it's really funny. Again, like, Vince is like brilliant, but he also uses all the tools that have been in television forever. They are the odd couple. Yeah. They are literally the odd couple. You have the one brainiac, whatever, then you have the one relative street smarts kind of dummy. Yeah. But together, like, they're gonna build an empire. And it's really funny to watch this person who's just like, well, I flunked you because you couldn't be like me, but you still need me to do this job. They actually need each other, and that is the best version of it. Because if Jesse doesn't need Walt and vice versa, there isn't the relationship that is going to be really what we're following for the entirety of the show. It is really about these two's relationship. And so getting to be able to see that, I think it's just really important to build it that way where we can see that Jesse is always going to annoy Walt because he doesn't really understand the chemistry. And Walt is always going to annoy Jesse because he thinks that he's an idiot. You know what I mean? And so, like, they're going to find balance and lean on each other in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's really great that you mentioned the odd couple. That's not a connection I made before, but it's totally true.
Yeah.
And how we can take these sort of tropes
Yeah.
and put our own spin on them. I'll be honest, I did not watch Breaking Bad for a while. I don't think I got into it until maybe the third or fourth season. And I was purposely didn't want to watch it because I was a big fan of Weeds. That was my favorite show. And when I heard about the concept of the show, I'm like, that's just Weeds. Like, I don't need to watch this. And so I purposely didn't watch it. And then when I started watching, I'm like, this is brilliant.
Really good, yeah.
But it just shows that you can't, it basically is the same concept of like a suburban type person starts selling drugs in order to help their family. That's the same premise as Weeds as it is Breaking Bad. But they're two wildly different executions.
Yeah.
And that just shows to me that you can take the same basic premise, the same basic ingredients, but your individual voice is what's going to make it different.
Absolutely. And again, I think even character, like I also am a big fan of Dingy Cohen. I loved Weeds, and it's still funny though, because I don't think though in Weeds we have a main character that is doing things that are difficult, but she's not murdering people.
No.
You know what
Nancy's
I mean?
no Walt.
She's no Walter. She's no Walter. And again, I think we watched it for different reasons. I don't know. I think I found a lot of like comedy in Weeds.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious.
It's a hilarious show. And I think that was more the thing of like almost the absurdity of the suburban world and like the difference between what's right and what's wrong about marijuana when they're also stealing from the PTA and all this stuff. So it's just interesting. But like, it is the same thing, but the Nancy and Walt are just such different characters, which always is going to produce a different show.
Yeah, because I always hear when newer writers are starting out worried about my idea. I don't want anyone to steal my idea. Like, your idea is not that special.
It's not.
Like, it's not unique. How long have humans existed? Like, every idea you've had is probably someone else has already thought about it. But what is unique is the lens that you can put on it. Just like you said, Walt and Jesse are like the odd couple. Like, what is your spin on that? Even Atlanta, I remember Donald Glover saying he just thought it was Seinfeld, except like Donald Glover is like the George type loser character, and he's the main character instead of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, because like Lakeith is like Kramer, like just saying weird shit. Like, and that's true, but Atlanta doesn't feel anything like Seinfeld. So it's like not about you trying to come up with the most unique idea. It's more, how can I execute sort of other tropes?
Absolutely. Execution and craft. Like, I think that's kind of the beauty in the spirituality of writing, because any way that you connect to it, you can create your own story, and it doesn't have to be connected to anybody else, and it can be your own version. It's like, just like people, everybody's unique and different. We all have the same parts for the most part, but it is, you can tell the story however you want, and it can be as unique. It's like, it's really beautiful that is even possible, that you can tell the story, but we also know that there are thousands of different ways to connect with story, to connect with characters. And so it's exciting. It's really, really exciting that if you can do it, there's thousands of different ways to do it, just like there's thousands of different ways to do structure, to do writing in a way that's whatever. But if it works, it usually has the same elements, which is really cool.
Very true. Yeah. So in Act 4, we get to like the resolution of the story. So we've seen Walt go from this mild-mannered chemistry teacher, gets the cancer diagnosis, decides, hey, I'm going to change my life, going to be a drug dealer. I don't know nothing about drugs. I have to link up with my former student Pinkman to make the drugs. You know, the first attempt, he makes the pure glass. Pure glass on his first attempt. Like you said, he's a poet. He's an artiste. He's like the Michelangelo of meth, really. He's doing big things. But, you know, they need somebody to sell this perfect product to. Jesse's like, hey, my boy Crazy 8. He's gonna buy the drugs. But, you know, in a great script, you can't just have your character's plans go perfect. So he thinks it's gonna go well. They show up, but Crazy 8, he thinks something's off. He's like, who is this man? He gotta be feds now.
And then Emilio, which is also a great surprise, comes out from the back, and he's also Like, he's like, yeah, I posted bail today, so how come you never even went to jail? Like, it seems like there's some whatever.
Fishy.
And again, it's not only your protagonist. Jesse also has to suffer. When we meet him, he's traversing out of the next door of the house, falls down, and then he sees his high school teacher. Now imagine you escape a drug bust in your house and you look to the left and you see your high school teacher that failed you in chemistry. Like, that he's also having the worst day ever. And then that teacher shows up at his house. And so it's just going through that process. He is also suffering. And the big turn is that Emilio is there, and then they start to kind of attack him and then take him to Walt.
Yes, and so we're also getting back to that point that we saw in the teaser. Now we have all the back context.
Up, yeah.
It's making sense. I learned that this term is called in media res.
Ooh,
did you know that?
I don't
and
know
that's
that.
Latin for in the middle of. So that's actually the technical term for that teaser we see is in media res.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. See, I'm learning something
new. You learn on this show.
Learning something new. I love that. I love that.
So we get back to that moment and we're starting to see it's all making sense.
Yeah.
We see, Crazy 8. They're like, hey, we're going to kill you guys. This is This seems fishy. But then Walt, again, chemistry is his superpower. He used that big old brain to outsmart them. He puts on the gas mask on him and Jesse, mixes up some, potions.
Yeah.
He's like the potions master, Professor Snape. Boom!
There's a big explosion.
Yes.
And so here's what's crazy. Like, when you're watching it, it's not like Vince tells you exactly what he's going to do, because when he's on the ride along with Hank is saying like, oh, blah, 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 you can't go in there. The gases can be whatever. It's like iron gas. And he's like, no, it's actually phosphorus, whatever. And they're looking at him like, how do you know that? He's just like, oh, I've heard it's something. You know what I mean? And so he already told us that that's what it is. And then when he heats up the thing, they have a gun on him, and then he heats up the thing, and then he reaches for it. And we already been told that that's what that is. And as soon as he dumps it, this explosion, he goes out. And my favorite part of the whole episode is he holds the door in, and he puts his back against it, and there's gunshots coming out over his head. And it's like, it's the simplest gag, because right now we're always talking about, when we're doing television, about like producibility. And it's the highest stakes moment of the entire thing, because he could die, but it's just like pops off on the top of the door, and we feel the thing, and we know that they're dying inside. And so, like, he just murdered 2 people, you know what I mean? And he did it to save his life, and I think any of us with that skill would have done it the same way. But let's not skip over the fact that he murders 2 people very casually.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I feel like in the pilot, there's such a huge arc from being this nerd who literally in the first scene, he's impotent. He can't even get it up for his wife. They're trying to do it. It's not working, to, murdering folks. And then we wrap around and do like a callback to that first scene where he has sex with the wife, and, he's putting it in. He's putting in work. Skylar's like, oh, wow.
Is that you? Which is a terrible thing for someone to say. But that is the final shot of the episode. But going back again, just for a second, like when we're right before we get to all of it, when we hear the sirens in the distance, he's in the middle of the street and he has the gun up, and we've caught back up, and he's like ready to go down, and then he's like, I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And then we realize that they're fire engines, which is like a beautiful surprise, because he's also the one who started the fire. Because they made them throw out the cigarette, right? But before he sees the fire engines, he pulls out the gun and he's gonna do whatever, and he puts it at his neck and he pulls the trigger.
Yes.
He pulls the trigger and the safety's on. Like, that is also suffering. He can't even kill himself the way he wants. Like, that is all that, like, even at the end of the pilot, he's still not able to do everything exactly the way that he wants to. And then when the gun goes off, he's like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. And then realizes when the fire engines come that he almost killed himself for no reason.
Yes.
And all of that. And then my favorite part of the show, he puts the gun away. Jesse comes out, he's like, what happened? He's just like, the phosphorus, they're dead. And they're dead now. And then he like takes a breath and he looks around and he's like, well, I guess we should clean all this up. And that is such because it's still Walter. He's still just the high school chemistry teacher in that moment. But it is a promise to the audience that this is not over. Mm-hmm. He's not going to stop and is going forward. And so for him to be like, let's clean this up. He could have like multiple people would be like, okay, I almost died. I almost got shot. I just murdered 2 people. And we also just got this dude's money, which is why I was doing it in the first place. And it was a lot of money. It looked like maybe it was 30,000, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so he could have ended everything there. He could have taken the money, gone home. He could have left the car there. He could have gone away. It could have been done. But he's like, let's clean this up because we know he's going to come back and do it again.
Yeah. And I think the moment of him, rather dying than surrendering, it goes to the series finale where we see that moment of Walt, spoiler alert, he dead. When he's dying on the floor. Yeah. But you see this smile, it's like he got what he wanted. He got the respect. He got the power. Yeah. If he was gonna go out, he's gonna go out like a G. Yeah. And I just think all of that is set up in the pilot.
Absolutely. And then the moment of just if the police were actually coming and he was in that moment, it would be the equivalent of getting expelled on your first day of school. It was like, oh, you thought you were, because I think Walt sees himself as brilliant.
Yes.
And so if he would have been in a position where I think I could sell method on the first day. Not only did he wasn't able to really sell meth, he almost died and killed 2 people. There's a version of him just being like, well, this isn't how I wanted to go out. But at the end of the show, he has conquered every villain. He has beat every whatever. He is the iconic drug dealing kingpin. He's like, now I can die. Because he got the respect. He got the admiration of whatever. He lost his family and a couple people along the way. But what he wanted was that respect, and he got it. And even though I think at the end of the show we don't like Walt as much, there's nobody who doesn't respect him because he saves Jesse at the end.
Yes. And I think Walt did what he, came out to do. He wanted the power. He wanted the respect. Like I said before, it was not about the money.
Yeah.
I think that was a lie he told himself. But I think that when we think about character development, Walt is a prime example of how we can execute an arc. I think as writers now, that's whenever you sell a show, that's what they want to know. What's the character arc? What's the story engine? What are these things? And that's why I think that Breaking Bad is the greatest show of all time, because it is a textbook example of how we write something where a character starts at one point, they end at another point, and the incremental steps. So when we get to that series finale, it all feels satisfying. Even the pilot is satisfying. The pilot could be a short film, to be honest. It's wholly satisfying in the pilot, and it sets us up for the rest of the show. We know what we're going to be getting.
And I love how Vince works, because he works on the macro and the micro, because as a show, it's perfectly A to Z. And what he started to do throughout the entirety of the show is the teasers were always an out of context surprise. They were always just hey, we're going to go over here. We're going to go to this warehouse. And then we're going to find out later why that place matters. Or a kid riding a bike or whatever. There are all these openings. And so there was always still the micro within the macro of what was happening. And it got really exciting to me to watch the episodes to be like, okay, that was a crazy teaser. How is that going to connect to anything? And every time it connected, there's something very satisfying about putting that last puzzle piece into the puzzle to finish it. It always felt good. And again, like I said, I love chess, and I really do think writing is just puzzles. And I do think that the human brain constantly wants to solve puzzles. And again, I see that with the apps that people play, and just whatever, it's just constantly, there's dopamine hits that come with that. And I think if you can create puzzles that the audience could solve even a second before they happen, it's something that's so gratifying and so exciting, and it pulls people through your series.
I think that is a perfect summation of this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
A puzzle, a joy to watch from start to end, just like it's been a joy chatting with you.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, Rae. This has been so great. This is really awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. And so, we're now wrapped up Walt's journey to Heisenberg, but would you stick around and answer a couple questions about writing in your career.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
Thanks.
Stand by.
So, Troy, you're someone that started out as an assistant,
Yes.
myself included. I always advocate for assistants. So, what advice would you have for someone who, entry level career, they're just breaking in the industry, about leveling up from being an assistant to making the jump to being a writer?
For sure. I think sometimes I like to start even earlier than that. I really do think that like when you are at a job as an assistant, even as a PA, you need to have a certain command of writing. Because I think in the past the position was something that they would really teach you and whatever, kind of bring you through the ranks. And I think that you had to like really spend the time to make sure that you are in a place where if an opportunity comes, you're ready to seize that opportunity. And I see some people who like sometimes that you can be an assistant and not have the scripts ready to go. And that's really difficult because if people want to help you, they can't if you're not in the place to do it. And so for me, I was a PA on Castle for a while, but then when I finished, I worked up to line producer's assistant. But when I finished on that show, it was just writing. It was just me, just writing as much as I can, as often as I can. I actually had a manager that was like, write a cop drama. And so I did that, write a medical drama. And it was really helpful to get the reps. But then when he was like, go play, I wrote a script, and that script has literally to this day gotten me every job that I've gotten because I had done the work. It was something that really spoke to me. It was something that was really personal to me, and it resonates when people read it. And so even as an assistant, I would rather have that script because it helps me get to the next level of whatever. But once you have the job, then it's how can you be indispensable? How can you be as helpful as possible? How can you get any level of responsibility? I even said back in the day when I was a PA, if you can't get someone's coffee order right, why would they ever give you a scene? You know what I mean? And so but it matters. Like it's the little things matter. Like if there's somebody who likes a certain type of pen and you always have that ready for them, people notice those things. And so being indispensable, being helpful in that way is a great way to get noticed. And then once you're noticed, you have to have the currency to give. You have to have the script. You have to have the idea so somebody can take that, run with it, use it, and be ready for those opportunities when they come. Because I've been on multiple times where there's a showrunner that says, hey, like, there's a script that might be open and they offer it to different people, but it's going to be based off of either a spec that they're going to write in real time, which is difficult because you have to actually just write it, or scripts that you guys have that are your specs. And so you have to have a script that you feel is really strong and have that for when you're in the job. And one last thing I would say, don't work on one script for too long. If you are working on a script and you think it's good, great, get notes on it, do adjustments. You think it's great, send it around, whatever. Go to the next script. You need to get the reps. I don't think that I wrote the script that got me most of my jobs until 6 scripts in. You have to fail and get better. You have to see how things are whatever. And if you do it, it actually happens really quickly. It can happen really quickly if you're getting the reps, but you have to get the reps. And so for me, having the sample, doing the work, and then being indispensable so you can get the opportunities when they come.
I think that was a perfect answer, especially I 100% agree. I was an assistant as well. And when I became an assistant, I was shocked at the amount of people that didn't have scripts that were assistants. I would say at least probably 50%, if not more, of the other assistants I met either had never written a script, or if they written a script, it was like one that they didn't feel proud of showing people. Yeah. And like you said, that's your currency. Like a finished script is your currency. Yeah. People don't care about your ideas or half written things. They need to see something that's finished. So everything you said, 100%.
And I love that you said finish, because finish is better than great or perfect. Like sometimes you just have to finish something, and even if it's not great, it still will give you more currency than having nothing at all. Yes. And so that can be difficult for some people who are just like, no, it's not good enough. It needs to be perfect. And it's just like, well, keep working on this or the next thing. But eventually you have to show it to people. You have to be confident in what you're working on.
Yeah.
And being open to the feedback, because if it's not there yet, then that's also something you need to know.
Yeah, and notes are the most valuable thing you can get from people sometimes. Absolutely. Like sometimes people are expecting a job or a referral, but really the notes is what's gonna get it in shape.
Absolutely.
So my last question is about writing. As writers, we usually use original pilots as our writing sample, but we were talking about Breaking Bad. I wonder, do you think there's a difference between writing something as just a sample and writing a pilot that's actually going to be produced, or do you use the same sort of process? How does that work for you?
Oh, that's a great question. It's funny though, because I think writing a script that you want to be produced is more difficult. But I don't think that for people who are starting out should have really too much thought about production. For me, I want you to tell the story that's the best story that you can tell, that makes somebody feel something. That is your currency. The action sequences, the whatever, if you want a reader to feel something, if they don't, you've lost them. And that is what you are working towards. So if it's in a skyscraper building or in a local pub, that doesn't matter as much as long as the story that you're telling fits and makes your audience feel something. And if they feel something, it really doesn't matter. I will tell you, the script that has gotten me all of my jobs, the amount of people that are like, I don't know if we can ever make this because of how expensive it is. And there's a train sequence, I go for it. But it works, and people in the world that I'm trying to build, people can feel, and the things that I'm trying to say, people feel the emotion and they understand and like the characters. And so it doesn't matter as much. For me, when I'm working on my own stuff now, I think producibility is something that's really important because there's things that I want to sell, but I almost for myself have to let that go. I need to tell the story that I want to tell and use the tools that I can, and then figure out how it could be pinched or moved or whatever, because they really aren't the same process. And if there's somebody who wants to make your project, they are going to give you the notes and tell you where it's too expensive and where it doesn't make sense. And so let that be its own stage. Be free when you're writing, especially a spec that's supposed to show your ability.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Don't worry about that. Just let the pen flow.
Yeah.
Unless you're gonna make it yourself, then worry about that.
Yeah, then you should think about it a little bit. But even then, you should it's sometimes you almost have to start with the producibility so you can make sure that you get the other side. So
yeah. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Had
I'm so glad to be here.
Time.
Yeah.
This was our first episode of the show, so thank you for being.
I get to be the first?
Yeah.
It feels good. All right, cool. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Troy.
That's so great being here.
Thank you again to our guest, Troy Dangerfield. Of course, shout out to Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, for writing such a wonderful pilot, one of my personal fave pilots of all time. And thanks to you for tuning in. Now, if you enjoyed this podcast, please like, follow, and subscribe. Not only that, we're gonna need you to spread the word. I challenge you to tell 3 people that would enjoy this podcast. It would really help us as we're starting out. You can also follow In The Cut on Instagram @InTheCutLA. Check out our website, inthecutla.org, for more resources. And until the next time, stay in the cut.